So, Shahid, there is obviously, a lot of questions. I imagine that you come across some measure of skepticism in some quarters as to why you would be challenging Nancy Pelosi, both in terms of she's obviously rather well funded, but also many people have a perception of her that in the context of the Democratic Party, that she's progressive. I think people would say, she was originally a member of the Progressive Caucus. Why are you primarying her from the left?
I'm primarying Speaker Pelosi from the left because as the Democratic Speaker of the House, unfortunately, she all too often supports conservative policies and conservative figures. She protects the president, a criminal president, from impeachment. She's funded voluntarily, without being coerced in any way, Trump's concentration camps without securing any protections for human rights. She's insisted upon Republican fiscal austerity rules that constrain the progressive aspirations of the emerging House majority. The largest caucus in the House, the Congressional Progressive Caucus, is one that she co-founded. Yet she consistently turns a deaf ear to that caucus's interests. Speaker Pelosi is a avowed opponent of universal health care. She derides robust solutions to the mounting global climate crisis. She presided over a historical collapse in federal spending on affordable housing. She helped sweep CIA torture under the rug. She funded Bush's wars. I could go on. But the reputation she has as a progressive is entirely undeserved by today's standards. She may have been a progressive by yesterday's standards, and I appreciate and applaud the work that she's done over the course of her 30-year career. But if there is anything that is increasingly clear with every passing day in our country, it is that we need a transition in leadership generationally to people who are more acquainted with the experience of working people, to people who are more concerned about the future and the various mounting environmental, constitutional, international crises that the failed leadership of the past continues, unfortunately, to create and fester instead of fixing. And that's why I'm here.
Let's talk about a couple of those. I know that you took a tour of one of these concentration camps down at the border with children, and we should say that you're specifically referencing the I think it's $4.9 billion bill that is funding theoretically the expansion and providing resources to house children, to basically imprison them. There were progressive defectors.
To illegally imprison them. I mean, that's a thing worth noting, is that we have no authority to detain these people, right? This is an illegal enterprise from the outset that Speaker Pelosi could have defunded, like she could have defunded Bush's illegal wars. But at every opportunity to support a military-industrial complex, even when it undermines human rights, again, unfortunately, Speaker Pelosi has not been on the side of this city. She's instead represented the Beltway in Washington.
Why do you think that? I mean, why do you think that message has not gotten out? Or let me rephrase that. To what extent do you think your message is getting out? Yeah, well, I mean, honestly, because I think that listen, we are living in a different era now, as you say, and for many, many years, those of us on the left have been told this is the best we can do. I have ideas. Barack Obama famously said, if we had a different situation in America, we could have Medicare for all. He said that back in 2008. He's since said a different thing in 2018, that it's an idea whose time has come. But at that time, we are always told on the left that we are proposing, by many in the Democratic Party, we are proposing as much as as left as we can go. But that has shifted, and it does seem like Nancy Pelosi has not shifted along with it. To what extent do you think that message is that people understand that concept? And then to the extent that anybody doesn't in your district, how will you let them know that?
Yeah, our message is certainly out there, and I wouldn't even say it's taken me to deliver it. I've only half jokingly said publicly that Speaker Pelosi appears to be campaigning on my behalf recently. And it's very much to the point that you're making. She is revealing the relative conservatism implicit in her, not just policy and not just her representation or her rhetoric, but just her entire paradigm, as you were reflecting. The progressives of today are much bolder than those who preceded us. And what you're ultimately reflecting on, and I think what the body politic is only now starting to understand beyond the context of Bernie's 2016, beyond the context of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in 2018, is that we are living through a generational transition in American politics. And it will be an earthquake. By the time it is done, the boomers will be gone. The millennials are already the largest generational voting bloc. And that's why Bernie did so well in 2016. It's why he'll be the next president. It's why Speaker Pelosi's career is nearing its end. And it's why I'm increasingly poised to replace her. In terms of how do we get the message out across the district, it's a combination of ground game, traditional media engagement, the conversation we're having now, as well as very robust social media outreach. And our ground game is stronger than it ever got in 2018. In 2018, I got as many votes as Representative Ocasio-Cortez did in her primary in 3 months without any media attention. We have a full year this time. We're getting media attention. We have nearly daily mobilizations, hundreds of volunteers. There are signs up all over the city, and we're still a year out from the election. So I have a great deal of confidence that unless Speaker Pelosi recovers a willingness to represent the district, which is to say if she continues representing the Beltway first, she will number her own days in the House. And I'm very eager, certainly, to offer the voters of San Francisco an alternative. And having received the support, we're at 4,000 donors now from across the city, across the Bay Area, the state, and even the entire country. We're increasingly poised to liberate the seat. That's exactly what I plan to do.
It's interesting because I think to a certain extent there was a parody of Nancy Pelosi developed by the right and frankly, I don't think it was terribly successful, at least not recently. Maybe it was more so back in the day. But nevertheless, the sort of the corruption of the Bush administration still brought her to the speakership. But there was a parody of Nancy Pelosi based upon the idea of San Francisco, that she represented San Francisco politics, and presumably that was the right using homophobia as as some type of tool. Yeah, as a dog whistle. And what's interesting is that, and I don't want to overstate this, but the electoral salience of like the question of marriage equality seems to be essentially gone. I don't want to say that there is that homophobia is in any way eradicated or the desire for people to turn back the clock is right, eradicated.
But after the Oberfeld decision, it's off the table, right? It's been constitutionally decided by the Supreme Court.
Yes, and it's, knock on wood, they don't get another seat and they don't start revisiting settled law. But regardless, at this point, it no longer has the salience. And I wonder if, to a certain extent, progressives bought into the right-wing frame and just simply assume that Nancy Pelosi is representing their interests. But let's take a break here, and when we come back, I want to talk about some specifics about Nancy Pelosi. You mentioned a reference to PAYGO. I want to talk about that and what the implications are. And then I want to talk about the relevance of this. I want to get a little more deeply into the relevance of this race to people outside of your district.